At 13:40 hours local time, in the Strait of Hormuz, the USS Donald Cook was threading the needle. Literally, the Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Sounds like plenty of room until you factor in shipping lanes, oil tanker traffic, and the Iranian coastline sitting close enough to read the highway signs. This is the single most important choke point on Earth. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply transits through here every day. And on both sides of that narrow band of water, someone is always watching. On this particular afternoon, what was watching the USS Donald Cook was a swarm of Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy speedboats, 5 of them, coming fast off the port bow //. The Cook is an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, 510 feet of steel, 9,200 tons fully loaded, and enough firepower to ruin the afternoon of anyone within 200 nautical miles. Her crew of roughly 280 sailors have been transiting the strait on a routine passage, the kind of trip that looks simple on a map and feels anything but simple when you're standing on the bridge watching Iranian fast attack craft close your position at 40 knots //. 40 knots is fast. Not jet fast, but fast enough that a boat doing 40 knots toward you doesn't feel like a boat. It feels like a problem with a deadline. At that speed, a vessel 2,000 yards out reaches you in under 2 minutes. 2 minutes is not a lot of time to make decisions that can start a war or prevent one, depending on which direction you get it wrong //. The ORGCN speedboats were both Hammer class and Blade Runner type hulls. Small, low to the water, built for exactly this kind of harassment operation. Fast enough to outrun most things, nimble enough to dart between shipping traffic, and cheap enough that losing one isn't a strategic disaster for the Iranians. They come in groups precisely because individually they're not much of a threat to a warship. Together, from multiple angles, at high speed, they're a problem set. Not because they're going to sink a destroyer, but because they force the destroyer's crew to make decisions under pressure with incomplete information and a countdown clock running in the background //. This is a tactic the IRGCN has been running since the 1980s. They perfected it during the tanker war. They ran it constantly through the 2000s. They run it now. If you're surprised by it, you haven't been paying attention. The USS Donald Cook's crew was not surprised. They have been tracking these boats since they departed the Iranian naval facility at Bandar Abbas 40 minutes earlier. The Combat Information Center had them on surface search radar before they were even visible from the bridge. So the information picture was clear. What wasn't clear was intent //, that word, intent. There's a lot of heavy lifting in a situation like this. The boats were armed. They were visibly manned by IRGCN personnel in uniform. They were closing at a rate that made casual interpretation impossible. But armed men closing at speed is not, by itself, a shooting situation. Not in international waters, where the rules of engagement are written to avoid the kind of mistake that turns a Strait of Hormuz incident into a front-page catastrophe. The officer of the deck called it up to the captain. The captain called the TAO. The TAO queried CIC. Standard escalation of awareness. Everyone looking at the same picture, trying to make the same decision at the same time through different layers of authority //. The Cook broadcast on bridge-to-bridge radio. Channel 16, the international distress and hailing frequency. Standard warning. Something along the lines of, unidentified vessels, this is a United States Navy warship operating in international waters. You are approaching in an unsafe manner. Alter course immediately. The translation is always the same. We see you. We know what you're doing. You should stop doing it. The boats did not stop. They spread out //. Now this is where it got tactically interesting. 5 boats closing from a single bearing is manageable. You watch them, you track them, you have a fire control solution ready, and you wait to see what they do. 5 boats spreading to 3 different bearings while simultaneously accelerating is a different problem. That's not harassment. That's a coordinated approach pattern. The same swarm geometry the IRGCN practiced in the Persian Gulf for years during exercises they were happy to publicize, exercises with names that translate roughly to great profit, in case the subtlety was lost on anyone watching, /and CIT updated the contact tracks in real time. 2 boats swinging wide around the Cook's starboard side, 2 holding on the port quarter. 1 racing ahead to a position off the bow, cutting across the shipping lane. The Cook was now the center point of a box formed by 5 separate fast-moving contacts, and the box was getting smaller at 40 knots /and the captain had options. He always had options. That's why you spend 20 years in the Navy before they give you a ship. The first option was to maneuver. Accelerate, change course, break the geometry. And Arleigh Burke can push 31 knots. Fast enough to complicate the pattern, not fast enough to outrun speedboats built specifically to be uncatchable by things the size of a destroyer. Maneuvering in the Strait of Hormuz is also complicated by the fact that the strait has traffic. Container ships, tankers, LNG carriers transiting in both directions on a schedule that does not flex because a United States warship is having a tactical problem. The Cook couldn't just punch it and turn left. The geometry of the strait, the traffic, and the threat were all constraints operating simultaneously /and The second option was to continue broadcasting warnings and wait. This is actually the correct choice right up until it isn't. You broadcast, you track, you document, you wait for an unambiguous hostile act before you respond with force. The rules of engagement are designed this way intentionally, because the alternative, shooting the moment something looks threatening, would have produced a body count in the Persian Gulf that makes any diplomat's career a short one. The problem with waiting is that waiting has a geometry too. The box was closing. At some point, waiting becomes its own answer /and on the weather decks. The crew was already at their stations. The 50 caliber mounts were manned. The 25mm Bushmaster on the bridge wings was manned. The Mark 45 5-inch gun on the foredeck was manned, but not laid on target, because laying a 5-inch gun on a speedboat at 500 yards is the kind of escalation that has its own paperwork trail and its own policy review process, and nobody wanted to start that clock yet. The standard non-escalatory posture is to man everything, point the small stuff, and keep the big stuff in a state of readiness that's visible without being a provocation /and In the lead boat, the one that had cut across the bow, was now running a parallel course 200 yards off the Cook's port side, close enough to be clearly visible from the bridge without binoculars. The IRGCN crew aboard were visibly armed. Zizek heavy machine guns on pintle mounts. RPG tubes visible. 1 man operating what appeared to be a video camera, because the IRGCN documents these encounters as thoroughly as the US Navy does, just for different audiences /and The radio crackled. The IRGCN boat hailing the Cook, not on channel 16, on a different frequency, one monitored by the Sea Watch, but not the standard maritime hailing channel. The message, intercepted and translated in real time, was a demand: leave the area. The Strait of Hormuz, they were asserting, was Iranian territorial waters. The Cook had no right to be here. Alter course. Leave now /and this claim is legally incorrect by every standard of international maritime law. The Strait of Hormuz is an international strait, which carries with it the right of transit passage for all vessels, including warships, regardless of whose territorial waters the centerline runs through. The IRGCN knows this. The US Navy knows this. The legal argument is not the point. The point is that someone on that speedboat just transmitted a demand over a radio frequency and is waiting to see what happens next /. And what happened next is that Cook transmitted back, in English, on the same frequency, citing international law, citing the right of innocent passage, citing the specific articles of UNCLOS that govern exactly this situation, the way a very calm, very tired law professor might recite case law to a student who was pointing a machine gun at them. The message was clear. We are not leaving. We are in our rights to be here. And we are very aware of where you are and what you're doing / 20 seconds of silence. On a tactical radio net during an active approach, 20 seconds feels like a geological epoch / The 4 flanking boats decelerated. Not stopped, decelerated. Still inside 400 yards on the port and starboard quarters, but slowing. The lead boat held its parallel course for another 90 seconds, cameras still running, and then it too began to fall back. Gradually, no dramatic turn, no aggressive maneuver in the opposite direction. Just a slow, deliberate withdrawal that maintained plausible deniability in both directions. We were just transiting. We were just exercising. We always operate in these waters. Nothing happened here / Nan technically, they were right. Nothing happened. Nobody fired. Nobody was hit. No international incident. No footage that ended careers. No 3 a.m. phone calls to embassies. Just a US warship transiting the Strait of Hormuz and 5 Iranian speedboats doing what Iranian speedboats do, and everyone going home afterward / except the Cook SOIC had documented every second of it. Radar tracks, radio intercepts, video from the ship's external cameras, auto footage from the sensor suite, the approach geometry, the spread pattern, the hailing frequency, the demand. All of it logged, all of it time-stamped, all of it submitted up the chain through Bahrain, through Fifth Fleet, through the Joint Chiefs, to whoever reads those reports in the building across the Potomac and files them for future reference / There is what the 5 Iranian speedboats actually accomplished. They confirmed, for the 100th time in 2 decades, that the IRGCN runs this tactic and that the tactic does not work against prepared warships. They added another data point to a database of Iranian behavior that the US Navy has been building since before some of those speedboat crews were born. And they demonstrated, again, that 40 knots is not fast enough to matter when the ship you're harassing already has a fire control solution on your hull and is waiting patiently for you to make a mistake / The USS Donald Cook continued to transit. She cleared the strait at 16:42 hours and turned southwest into the Gulf of Oman. The crew stood down from their stations. The 50 calories gunners cleaned their mounts. The TIE wrote his report. The captain drank a cup of coffee that was probably cold by the time he got to it / 5 boats, 4 hours of tension, 0 shots fired, and the world's most important shipping lane stayed open for another day / That's how you win an argument in the Strait of Hormuz. Not by shooting. By being so obviously, visibly ready to shoot that nobody makes you do it / and bye for now.